I had the biologist Colin Wright on my podcast to discuss the politicization of sciences. And that highlighted a lot of the left-wing ideologies creeping their way into sciences and corrupting what is truth. Now I want to discuss the corporatization of sciences, which is equally as dangerous. When you are pushing an agenda through science, it will corrupt the seeking of truth. That's what science is. Science is trying to find out what is true and what is not. And when it is corrupted by an ideology or an agenda, it muddles what is truth. The same way that biology has been corrupted by a left-leaning agenda to say things like biological sex does not exist.
It's not correct that there is such a thing as biological sex. And I'm a historian of medicine. I can unpack that for you at great length if you want, but in the interest of time, I won't. So that's a very popular misconception. So essentially, when in my transgender studies classes, what we're doing is looking at actual research and identifying ways that current social issues related to trans people or things that are associated with trans, such as free speech arguments and claims, how that connects to the way that people are thinking, the way that research has been framed, the histories.
Give us some of the other pronouns that one would hear, typically.
I don't focus on pronouns because pronouns are actually part of a cisnormative culture. So what we do is learn about...
Well, I'm going to stop you right there.
Yeah, I was just about to explain.
Good.
So we don't start from a cisnormative perspective because that can't actually go very far.
What does cisnormative mean?
So I'm going to start us there. Cisnormative is basically the very popular idea and assumption that most people probably have, and definitely that our structures convey, that there is such a thing as male and female, that they connect to being a girl or a boy or a man or a woman. And then sometimes that will also recognize intersex or trans people or transsexual people, as you mentioned, because that's sometimes also referred to as a gender binary. So anything that fits within a gender binary can work within cisnormativity.
Okay.
But cisnormativity is basically that everyone assumes that there is male and female, and so very little is actually looked at to understand what's actually the case. And scientists have been doing this for at least over 50 years.
Your view would be it's much more complicated than that.
Right, it's not my view. I just know that for over 50 years, scientists have shown that that's not true, and yet our social systems haven't been able to find a way to address.
It is equally dangerous to push an agenda like climate change does not exist. And the right-wing corporate manipulation is all around us and very, very dangerous. The way that deregulation is being promoted is that any regulation is seen as a move towards socialism. So when the left side of the politics push ideas that are socialist, it gives that concept legs to stand on. It's almost like how when CNN reports on something that is false, it gives legitimacy to the concept of fake news. And that is extremely dangerous because it brings into question the important institution of our media. But jumping into how corporations have corrupted sciences, this goes back since the inception of this country, even before this, with the slave trade. Slave trade was big business, and it got pushed by science talking about how African Americans were inferior and things like that, the science of the day. Then it went into things like radium, saying that it was good for you. Tobacco, saying, why would we ever want to kill our clients? And then fossil fuels, saying it's not bad to put carbon into the atmosphere. All of these had tremendous money and funded science. Corporations have tremendous wealth. And with that wealth, they can hire scientists to do work to get a very specific outcome. And that's not science. Most likely the largest cause of obesity in America right now gets traced back to the 1950s when a Harvard study was released that said sugar does not cause obesity and is not bad for you, but fat is bad for you. Well, we know that that's not true now, but a group of Harvard scientists, including Ansel Keys, released this study, and that structured all of the nutritional outlines for our country. How many people have died because of sugar? Millions upon millions. Think about it like this. If you are a graduating scientist, a chemist or something like that, The dream gig would be to be picked up by a big company that will pay you a lot of money. You get picked up by DuPont or Nestle or something like that, and they tell you, we want science that will lead to this outcome. And you do it because it's your job. You come out of college with tremendous college debt, and you have to pay off that debt, and you want to buy a house, and you want to get a nice car, and you want to live a good life and a comfortable life. You want to start a family. Are you going to take your scientific background and go work for a nonprofit somewhere, some humanitarian effort? Or are you going to go to a giant corporation that will give you a very good paycheck and a steady job? A good example of this is social media apps were designed by neuroscientists. So if you're a brilliant neuroscientist, what better than to be picked up by Google or Facebook or something like that, and you design these apps to be addictive, the same way that slot machines are addictive. And there are brilliant neuroscientists right now figuring out how to make apps, of social media apps, addictive. We need uncorrupted science, looking for the truth. And that is very difficult to do in a capitalist society gone awry. By no means am I a socialist. By no means do I not like capitalism. But markets are excellent for figuring out how to do things, but terrible at figuring out what to do. And we have adopted both of those elements into the free market system. And the people feeding into this system come from the education system, my world. And the K through 12 education system exchanges imagination for compliance. The way the education system is structured is it builds worker bees, people that don't question and just perform. That's what it's about. That's what standardized tests are about. That's what standards are about. It's all about performing, making excellent sheep, as William Dershowitz would say. Don't question, just do your job. And because of that, we lose both seeing the good possibilities and the bad. We lose innovation and we lose the foresight to see where could this go wrong, because our young people are working on autopilot. They're just doing what they're told. So when they get picked up by one of these companies and they're told, come up with this algorithm or figure this out, they just do it, and they're not thinking through this process because they have not been told to think critically throughout their entire education. And I've seen this firsthand. And then once you get into that corporate structure, it's so big, and there's so many managers and executives and shareholders and board members and things like that, that there is no one where the responsibility falls on them. All of the shareholders, and then there's the CEO, and there's all the presidents and vice presidents and everything like that, and then there's all the workers, and everyone's just doing their little part. So when they create something very, very dangerous, they can all say, it wasn't my fault. The responsibility has been absolved. So this sounds pretty grim. What do we do about it? Well, I have a few suggestions. One is apply science everywhere in your life. Apply the scientific method. If you don't know what the scientific method is, it's ask questions, do research, make a hypothesis, do an experiment, analyze the results, come to a conclusion. And another thing you can do that I promote all the time is seek disconfirmation. When you have an ideology, try to prove it wrong. In everything in your life that you believe to be true, try to prove it wrong. And if you go forward throughout your life with that lens of saying, maybe I don't know this, maybe I don't know that, maybe what I know to be true isn't true, then you will be a scientist. And then it'll be much easier to bring that thinking into very important institutions in our society. You also need to know that you are corruptible. It is very hard to stand up to the pressures of keeping a job or the social pressures of the mob. It's important to look into the Asch test and the Milgram experiment. The Asch test has to do with the length of lines, and they test to see, will you go around along with what the group says or think for yourself? And the other one is the Milgram experiment, where if you are given permission to administer an electric shock by an authority figure, will you administer that electric shock? The Asch test and the Milgram experiment. We should all be working very hard to be able to pass both of those tests. So those are a few things you can do to try and become immune to the corruption of science. Because if science becomes corrupted, we are lost. The concept of what is an expert, the concept of what is real in society, the very foundations of society can crumble. And that is a terrifying thing, and it's very important that we have strong, brave individuals who are willing to do the work to hold up the real search for truth.